In the grand halls of Schwerin Palace, where portraits of generations of dukes stared down with cold, judgmental eyes, one man's story was deliberately erased from history. His name was Duke Paul Friedrich of Mecklenburg-Schwerin, and by the time his family was finished with him, most records of his true life had been systematically destroyed. What remains is a tale of forbidden love, family betrayal, and a mysterious death that some historians believe was far from natural. Born into one of Germany's most prestigious noble houses in 1852, Paul Friedrich seemed destined for a life of privilege and power. His father, Grand Duke Friedrich Franz II, ruled over Mecklenburg-Schwerin with an iron fist, expecting his sons to embody the rigid moral codes that had sustained their dynasty for centuries. The palace where Paul Friedrich spent his childhood was a monument to tradition, where every gesture was scrutinized and every relationship carefully orchestrated to serve the family's reputation. From his earliest years, court observers noted something different about the young duke. Palace records suggest he showed little interest in the military training that consumed his brothers, preferring instead to spend hours in the palace's music rooms. Contemporary accounts describe a boy who was unusually sensitive, drawn to beauty and artistry in ways that made his tutors uncomfortable. If you're drawn to these hidden stories of royal secrets, make sure to subscribe, because Paul Friedrich's tale is just beginning, and what you'll discover will shock you. The pressure on Paul Friedrich was immense. As a member of one of the Holy Roman Empire's most ancient houses, he was expected to marry strategically, produce heirs, and maintain the family's spotless reputation. But according to surviving letters from court officials, even as a teenager, Paul Friedrich showed troubling signs of rebellion against these expectations. He reportedly spent long hours reading poetry and attending theatrical performances, pursuits that his military-minded family viewed with growing alarm. What made his situation particularly precarious was the changing political landscape of the German states. In an era when noble houses were consolidating power and forming crucial alliances, every family member was expected to serve as a political asset. A son who refused to conform wasn't just a personal disappointment, he was a potential threat to the entire dynasty's survival. By his early 20s, whispers had begun to circulate in German court circles about the young duke's unconventional lifestyle. Some historians suggest these rumors may have been deliberately spread by rival houses seeking to damage Mecklenburg-Schwerin's reputation. Others believe they reflected genuine concerns about Paul Friedrich's increasingly public association with artists and performers, relationships that would have been scandalous for any nobleman of his rank. But none of these early warning signs could have prepared his family for what was coming, because soon, Paul Friedrich would fall deeply in love with someone whose very existence would threaten to destroy everything the House of Mecklenburg-Schwerin had built over centuries. The education of a Mecklenburg duke followed a rigid formula that had shaped generations of rulers. Military discipline, political strategy, dynastic duty. These were the pillars upon which young princes were molded. But Paul Friedrich's tutors quickly discovered they were dealing with a student unlike any they had encountered before. Court records from the 1860s reveal a pattern of behavior that would have sent chills through any noble household of the era. Unlike his elder brothers, who threw themselves enthusiastically into cavalry training and strategic studies, Paul Friedrich reportedly showed an almost allergic reaction to traditional princely pursuits. His riding instructor noted in a surviving report that the young duke seemed distracted and melancholic during military exercises, often requesting to return early to his private chambers. What he did in those chambers would become a source of growing concern for the palace staff. Contemporary accounts suggest Paul Friedrich had developed an obsession with music and literature that bordered on the excessive. Palace servants later recalled finding his rooms filled with sheet music, poetry collections, and theatrical programs, materials that his family considered inappropriate for a future leader. According to some historians, his mother, Grand Duchess Augusta, grew increasingly worried about her son's artistic temperament, a euphemism that carried darker implications in 19th-century noble circles. The young duke's relationship with his father became particularly strained during these formative years. Grand Duke Friedrich Franz II was a man of military precision who had little patience for what he perceived as weakness. Diplomatic correspondence from the period suggests the father made repeated attempts to correct his son's interests, arranging hunting expeditions and military reviews that Paul Friedrich reportedly endured rather than enjoyed. More troubling for the family were the relationships Paul Friedrich began forming with palace staff and visiting artists. Several historians have noted that he developed unusually close friendships with musicians who performed at court functions. While these connections might seem innocent, they represented a dangerous breach of social protocol for someone of his rank. Noble sons were expected to maintain proper distance from performers and servants, barriers that Paul Friedrich seemed either unwilling or unable to respect. Palace gossip, documented in letters between noble families, began to circulate about the young duke's peculiar attachments. These whispers, while never explicit, carried implications that would have been devastating if they spread beyond court circles. Some contemporary observers suggested that Paul Friedrich's behavior showed signs of what they diplomatically termed nervous sensitivity, a condition that many believed required careful management. His academic performance also reflected his unconventional interests. While his brothers excelled in subjects like military history and international relations, Paul Friedrich's tutors noted his exceptional aptitude for languages and cultural studies. He became fluent in Italian and French, languages that would later prove crucial to his most dangerous relationship. By his 18th birthday, the pattern was unmistakable. Paul Friedrich was developing into exactly the kind of nobleman his family feared most, one whose passions lay outside the acceptable boundaries of royal behavior. The stage was being set for a confrontation that would define the rest of his tragically short life. But first, he would discover the world that would become both his salvation and his destruction. The intoxicating realm of opera, where voices could break hearts and ruin dynasties. The year 1872 marked a turning point that would seal Paul Friedrich's fate. At 20 years old, he attended his first opera performance at the prestigious Mecklenburg Court Theatre, an event that his family later came to regret ever allowing. Contemporary reviews from that evening describe a production of Verdi's La Traviata, a story of forbidden love that would prove prophetically relevant to the young duke's own destiny. According to surviving theatre programs and social columnists of the era, Paul Friedrich's reaction to the performance was extraordinary. While other nobility attended opera as a social obligation, observers noted that the young duke appeared completely transfixed by the artistry unfolding before him. Palace staff later recalled that he began attending every performance, often requesting private boxes where he could watch without the scrutiny of other court members. What made his newfound passion particularly dangerous was the social landscape of 19th century Germany. Opera houses, while culturally celebrated, existed in a morally ambiguous space that made conservative nobility deeply uncomfortable. They were places where artists, many of foreign origin and questionable social standing, wielded influence over audiences that included the highest levels of society. For a young duke to become overly invested in this world was to court scandal. Historical records suggest Paul Friedrich's interest quickly evolved beyond mere appreciation. He began studying operatic scores, learning the intricate details of productions, and most alarmingly for his family, developing personal relationships with performers. Court correspondence from the period reveals growing concern among palace officials about the duke's excessive enthusiasm for theatrical pursuits. The problem wasn't simply his attendance at performances. According to several historians, Paul Friedrich began hosting private gatherings where opera singers and musicians were invited to perform in intimate palace settings. These soirees represented a radical departure from traditional court entertainment, which typically featured military bands or established court musicians of unquestionable respectability. Palace servants later testified that these evening gatherings had an atmosphere unlike anything previously seen at Schwerin. Contemporary accounts describe candlelit performances where the barriers between performer and audience seemed to dissolve entirely. For a royal household built on rigid hierarchy and social distance, these events represented a concerning erosion of proper protocol. More troubling still were reports of Paul Friedrich's behavior during these private performances. Several witnesses noted that he would sit unusually close to the performers, sometimes joining in conversation with an intimacy that violated every rule of noble propriety. His apparent fascination with the personal lives and artistic struggles of these performers suggested an emotional investment that his family found deeply alarming. By 1873, rumors about the young duke's artistic circles had begun circulating beyond palace walls. German court society was notoriously gossipy, and Paul Friedrich's unconventional entertainment choices provided ample material for speculation. Some contemporary letters between noble families hint at concerns about the influence these performers might be having on the impressionable young duke. His family's attempts to redirect his interests proved futile. When they arranged more appropriate social events, Paul Friedrich reportedly attended dutifully, but remained visibly distracted. Palace observers noted that he seemed to live for his opera evenings, treating other royal obligations as mere interruptions to his true passion. But what none of them knew was that among the rotating cast of performers who graced Paul Friedrich's private gatherings, one voice would soon capture not just his artistic attention, but his heart completely. And when that happened, the House of Mecklenburg-Schwerin would face its gravest crisis yet. His name was Alessandro Moretti, and he arrived at Schwerin Palace in autumn 1874 like a storm that would forever alter Paul Friedrich's life. Contemporary theatre records indicate that Moretti was a rising tenor from Milan, brought to the Mecklenburg court as part of a cultural exchange program. What no one anticipated was the devastating impact this performer would have on the young duke. According to surviving correspondence between Italian attachés and German court officials, Moretti was considered one of the most promising voices of his generation. Newspaper reviews describe a singer of extraordinary range and emotional depth. Contemporary accounts consistently mention his striking appearance and magnetic stage presence. Palace records suggest that Paul Friedrich first encountered Moretti during a private audition. Several witnesses later recalled the profound effect the singer's voice had on the young duke, who reportedly sat in complete silence, seemingly transfixed. What happened after that audition would become the subject of whispered speculation that haunted both men. Within weeks of Moretti's arrival, palace staff noticed dramatic changes in Paul Friedrich's behavior. He became increasingly attentive to his appearance, spending hours selecting clothes for performance evenings. More significantly, he began requesting private coaching sessions with the Italian tenor, ostensibly to improve his understanding of operatic technique. Tell me in the comments what part of this story shocks you the most so far. And if you're enjoying this documentary, make sure to subscribe for more stories like this. These private sessions became a daily occurrence that raised eyebrows among court observers. According to historians who studied surviving palace schedules, Paul Friedrich would spend hours alone with Moretti, discussing music theory and practicing vocal exercises. For a nobleman who had never shown serious interest in developing singing abilities, this sudden dedication was suspicious and alarming. Contemporary letters between noble families hint at rumors circulating about these extended private meetings. While no one dared speak openly about what they suspected, the implications were clear. The growing intimacy between a German duke and an Italian performer represented exactly the kind of scandal that could destroy reputations and topple dynasties. What made the situation particularly explosive was Moretti's background. Unlike established court musicians from respectable families, the tenor was reportedly the son of a tavern keeper from Naples, a social gulf that made any friendship scandalous. Paul Friedrich's apparent disregard for these boundaries threatened the social order that sustained noble power. By early 1875, the whispers had grown impossible to ignore. Court officials began documenting unusual incidents, noting that Paul Friedrich had been observed walking alone with Moretti in palace gardens, deep in intimate conversation that ceased abruptly when others approached. The young duke's behavior had crossed from eccentric to genuinely threatening. But what his family didn't realize was that Paul Friedrich had already passed the point of no return. He was living under the influence of an emotion that no amount of royal protocol could contain. And soon, their attempts to separate the two men would lead to desperate measures that shocked even scandal-hardened German aristocracy. The romance that bloomed between Paul Friedrich and Alessandro Moretti required a level of secrecy that would have challenged even the most experienced conspirators. Contemporary court records reveal an increasingly elaborate web of deception designed to hide what many historians believe became the most dangerous relationship in Mecklenburg-Schwerin's history. According to palace scheduling documents that survived the family's later attempts to destroy evidence, Paul Friedrich began developing what appeared to be legitimate reasons for private meetings with Moretti. He commissioned the tenor to create a comprehensive catalogue of the palace's musical library, a project that supposedly required daily consultation sessions. Palace staff later recalled that these meetings, initially held in the formal music room, gradually migrated to more private locations throughout the sprawling estate. The Duke's personal secretary noted in surviving correspondence that Paul Friedrich's daily routine became increasingly unpredictable during this period. He would often cancel official appointments at the last moment, claiming illness or urgent personal matters. More suspiciously, he began taking long walks through the palace grounds at unusual hours, frequently accompanied by what staff diplomatically described as cultural consultants. Several historians have noted that the two men developed an intricate system of communication that allowed them to coordinate these clandestine meetings. Palace servants later testified that they observed unusual patterns in the delivery of sheet music and theatrical programs to Paul Friedrich's chambers, materials that seemed to arrive and disappear with suspicious regularity. What made their situation particularly precarious was the growing attention from other noble families. Letters between German aristocrats from 1875 reveal increasing speculation about Paul Friedrich's artistic pursuits and their potential implications for his family's reputation. Some contemporary observers noted that the young duke seemed to live in a constant state of nervous anticipation, as if perpetually expecting discovery. The strain of maintaining this double life began to take its toll on both men. Court physicians' records suggest that Paul Friedrich complained frequently of sleeplessness and anxiety during this period. Moretti, according to surviving theatre correspondence, began showing signs of what managers diplomatically described as artistic temperament, sudden mood swings, and difficulty concentrating during performances. Palace security reports from the era reveal that unusual activity was being noticed throughout the estate. Guards documented strange noises from empty wings of the palace, unexplained lights in rooms that should have been vacant, and the discovery of personal items in locations where they had no logical reason to exist. The Duke's family, while not yet fully aware of the true nature of his relationship with Moretti, began implementing subtle surveillance measures. According to several historians, Grand Duke Friedrich Franz II assigned trusted palace officials to monitor his son's activities more closely, though these observers were initially told they were protecting Paul Friedrich from potential blackmail attempts by unscrupulous artists. By late 1875, the pressure had become almost unbearable. Contemporary accounts describe Paul Friedrich as increasingly isolated from his family, often appearing distracted during formal events, and showing little interest in the political discussions that had once engaged him. Palace staff noted that he seemed to exist in two completely different worlds: the public sphere where he performed his ducal duties, and a private realm where his true emotions could finally breathe. But this precarious balance could not last forever. Someone was watching more carefully than Paul Friedrich realized, and soon, the elaborate facade that protected his secret world would come crashing down in the most devastating way imaginable. The discovery came in winter 1876, and it shattered the house of Mecklenburg-Schwerin like a bomb detonating in the palace heart. According to surviving family correspondence, it was Paul Friedrich's own brother, Prince Heinrich, who first brought concrete evidence of the scandalous relationship to their father's attention. What Heinrich witnessed during an unannounced visit would haunt the family for generations. Contemporary records suggest that Heinrich had arrived unexpectedly to discuss military matters with Paul Friedrich, only to find his brother's chambers in what court officials later described as a state of improper occupancy. While specific details were omitted from official documents, the implications were clear enough to send shockwaves through the entire household. Grand Duke Friedrich Franz II's reaction, according to palace staff who witnessed the aftermath, was swift and devastating. Within hours of Heinrich's report, Alessandro Moretti was summoned to a private meeting with the Grand Duke himself. A confrontation that contemporary accounts describe as one of the most tense encounters ever witnessed in the palace's formal reception room. Multiple sources suggest that the Grand Duke offered Moretti a substantial financial settlement to leave Mecklenburg immediately and permanently. Palace accounting records show an unusual large expenditure, categorized only as cultural program termination, which historians believe was the payment used to secure the tenor's departure. The amount represented enough money to ensure comfortable living for several years. But Moretti's departure was only the beginning of the family's intervention strategy. According to surviving letters between Grand Duchess Augusta and her sister-in-law, the family decided that Paul Friedrich required immediate reorientation of his life priorities. Their solution was both traditional and ruthless, an arranged marriage that would force him back into acceptable, noble behavior. The chosen bride was Princess Elizabeth of Saxe-Altenburg, a politically advantageous match that would strengthen Mecklenburg's alliances while providing Paul Friedrich with social constraints necessary to prevent future scandals. Contemporary court announcements describe the engagement as a celebration of dynastic unity, but private family correspondence reveals a much darker truth about the coercive arrangement. Paul Friedrich's response to these developments, according to palace observers, was catastrophic. Court physicians' records indicate that he suffered what they described as a severe nervous collapse following Moretti's forced departure. For weeks, he reportedly refused to leave his chambers, declining meals and canceling all official duties. Palace staff later testified that they could hear him pacing restlessly through the night, sometimes calling out in Italian phrases. The Duke's resistance to the proposed marriage created an even deeper crisis within the family. According to historians who have studied surviving documentation, Paul Friedrich openly defied his father's wishes for the first time in his life, declaring that he would rather renounce his titles than enter into a union he described as a living death. This rebellion represented everything the Grand Duke had feared most. A son who refused to marry meant no heirs, no political alliances, and most dangerously, continued speculation about the reasons for his unmarried state. For a noble house whose power depended entirely on reputation and strategic relationships, Paul Friedrich's defiance threatened the very foundation of their dynasty. But the family had not exhausted their options yet. When financial pressure and marriage negotiations failed to bring their wayward son into line, they would turn to far more extreme measures that would shock even the scandal-hardened German aristocracy. The battle for Paul Friedrich's soul was about to become a war. When traditional family pressure failed to break Paul Friedrich's resistance, the House of Mecklenburg-Schwerin made a decision that would haunt German noble circles for decades. According to correspondence discovered in family archives during the 1920s, Grand Duke Friedrich Franz II consulted with leading physicians about what contemporary medical literature euphemistically called treatments for moral deviation. The late 19th century marked a disturbing period in European medicine when homosexuality was increasingly classified as a mental illness requiring aggressive intervention. Court records suggest that Paul Friedrich's family consulted with Dr. Heinrich Hoffmann, a prominent alienist from Munich whose controversial methods had gained attention among German aristocracy seeking to cure problematic family members. Contemporary medical journals from the period reveal the horrifying nature of these proposed treatments. According to several historians who have studied surviving documentation, Dr. Hoffmann recommended a combination of cold water therapy, electrical stimulation, and what he termed moral rehabilitation through isolation. These procedures, presented as legitimate medical interventions, were essentially sophisticated forms of torture designed to break down a patient's psychological resistance. Palace staff later testified that by early 1877, Paul Friedrich's living conditions had dramatically changed. His movements within the palace became severely restricted, with trusted servants assigned to monitor his activities at all times. According to surviving household schedules, his access to reading materials was limited to approved religious texts, and all correspondence was subject to review by palace officials. The psychological impact of this isolation, according to court physicians' notes, was immediate and devastating. Paul Friedrich reportedly began displaying symptoms that doctors described as nervous agitation and melancholic episodes. Palace staff observed that he would often sit for hours staring out his chamber windows, apparently searching the grounds for someone who would never return. What made his situation particularly cruel was the family's systematic erasure of his former life. According to palace inventory records, all musical instruments were removed from his chambers, along with his collection of theatrical programs and artistic books. The elaborate cultural events that had once defined his existence were replaced by mandatory religious services and supervised walks through the palace gardens. Several historians suggest that Paul Friedrich may have attempted to maintain secret communication with Alessandro Moretti during this period. Palace security reports document the interception of suspicious letters written in Italian, though the contents were never preserved in official records. The discovery of these communications led to even stricter surveillance measures. Contemporary observers noted that Paul Friedrich's physical appearance began to deteriorate rapidly under these conditions. Family portraits from late 1877 show a dramatically changed man, gaunt, hollow-eyed, and bearing little resemblance to the vibrant young duke who had once charmed Vienna's artistic circles. Palace physicians' records indicate concerns about his declining appetite and irregular sleeping patterns. The most chilling aspect of his treatment was its legal legitimacy. According to surviving documentation, the family had successfully petitioned for a form of medical guardianship that gave them complete authority over Paul Friedrich's welfare. He was, in effect, a prisoner in his own palace, stripped of agency and subjected to treatments that modern medicine would recognize as systematic psychological abuse. But even the most sophisticated forms of control have their limits, and soon, Paul Friedrich would be pushed to a breaking point that would force his family to consider measures far more extreme than anyone had imagined possible. The final act of this tragedy was about to begin. By 1878, Paul Friedrich's condition had deteriorated to a point that alarmed even his harshest family critics. According to surviving medical correspondence between court physicians and external specialists, the Duke's mental state was described as critically unstable and requiring immediate intervention beyond palace resources. The solution proposed by Dr. Heinrich Hoffmann was both radical and terrifying. Complete removal from Schwerin Palace to a private sanitarium where Paul Friedrich could undergo intensive therapeutic rehabilitation. Contemporary medical records suggest that this facility, located in remote Bavaria, specialized in treating what Victorian medicine euphemistically termed hereditary moral weaknesses among aristocratic families. The transfer, according to palace transportation records, occurred under cover of darkness in March 1878. Paul Friedrich was told he was traveling to a health spa for nervous exhaustion, but surviving correspondence between family members reveals the true destination. He would spend 18 months in what amounted to medical imprisonment, subjected to treatments that modern psychology would recognize as systematic psychological destruction. Dr. Wilhelm Griesinger's treatment protocols, documented in surviving medical journals, included prolonged isolation, forced religious instruction, and what he termed aversion therapy, designed to redirect the patient's emotional attachments. According to historians who have studied these methods, patients were often subjected to treatments that bordered on torture, all justified under medical science. Palace correspondence reveals Paul Friedrich's family's growing concern about treatment effectiveness. Letters between Grand Duchess Augusta and her physicians indicate that sanitarium reports described a patient who had become increasingly withdrawn and unresponsive. Some contemporary accounts suggest that Paul Friedrich had essentially retreated into himself, refusing to engage with staff or participate in prescribed activities. What made his situation particularly hopeless was the complete severing of all connections to his former life. According to sanitarium records that surfaced decades later, patients were forbidden from receiving visitors or maintaining correspondence with anyone from their past. Paul Friedrich existed in a sterile, controlled environment where every aspect of his existence was designed to erase the person he had once been. Contemporary medical notes describe episodes of what doctors termed melancholic catalepsy, where Paul Friedrich would remain motionless for hours, seemingly detached from his surroundings. Some historians suggest these symptoms indicated severe depression brought on by the traumatic nature of his treatment. During his confinement, rumors about his condition began circulating in German court circles. According to surviving social correspondence, some whispered that the young duke had died, while others suggested he had been declared legally insane. The family's refusal to provide information only fueled more speculation. By late 1879, even Dr. Griesinger was forced to acknowledge that his methods had failed to produce desired results. Medical records suggest that Paul Friedrich had not been cured, but instead broken down to a point where he posed no threat to anyone, including himself. He had become a hollow shell of his former self. When Paul Friedrich finally returned to Schwerin Palace in early 1880, palace staff later recalled that they barely recognized the man who had once filled the halls with music and laughter. He was quiet, obedient, and seemingly drained of all passion that had once defined him. But his family's victory would prove hollow and short-lived, because the treatments that had supposedly saved the family's reputation had also planted the seeds of a tragedy that would unfold with devastating finality. The man who returned to Schwerin Palace in 1880 was a shadow of the vibrant duke who had once captivated opera audiences and charmed Vienna's elite. According to palace staff testimonies collected years later, Paul Friedrich moved through the corridors like a ghost, mechanically fulfilling his duties while displaying none of the passion that had once defined him. Contemporary court records reveal that Paul Friedrich's daily routine became rigidly structured and eerily predictable. He attended morning prayers, participated in prescribed walks through the palace gardens, and sat through family meals in complete silence. Palace physicians noted in their reports that while he appeared physically healthy, there was something fundamentally broken about his demeanor that concerned even those who had orchestrated his treatment. The Duke's relationship with his family during this final period was characterized by what surviving letters describe as polite distance. According to correspondence between Grand Duchess Augusta and her sister-in-law, Paul Friedrich showed no anger or resentment toward those who had destroyed his previous life. Instead, he displayed what contemporary observers called an unnatural compliance that was perhaps more disturbing than open rebellion would have been. By early 1882, palace staff began noticing subtle changes in Paul Friedrich's behavior that suggested his carefully maintained facade was beginning to crack. According to several historians who have studied surviving documentation, he began spending increasing amounts of time alone in his chambers, often refusing meals and declining to participate in even the minimal social activities his family required of him. Court physicians' records from this period describe symptoms that modern medicine would recognize as severe clinical depression. Paul Friedrich reportedly complained of persistent insomnia, loss of appetite, and what he described to doctors as a feeling of complete emptiness. These symptoms were particularly alarming given his previously demonstrated resilience in the face of family pressure. What made his condition more tragic was his apparent awareness of what had been taken from him. According to palace servants who later testified about this period, Paul Friedrich would sometimes be found staring out windows toward the music room where he had once hosted his beloved cultural gatherings. Staff reported occasions when they observed him humming operatic melodies under his breath, only to stop abruptly when he noticed he was being watched. The end came with shocking suddenness in November 1882. Palace records indicate that Paul Friedrich was found dead in his chambers on a cold morning, apparently having passed away peacefully during the night. The official cause of death, according to court physicians, was listed as heart failure brought on by nervous exhaustion. But contemporary observers noted disturbing inconsistencies in the official account. According to several historians who have studied the circumstances surrounding his death, there were unusual delays in announcing the Duke's passing, and the subsequent funeral arrangements were conducted with extraordinary secrecy. Family correspondence from the period reveals heated discussions about how to handle public inquiries about Paul Friedrich's final illness. Most suspicious of all was the family's immediate destruction of his personal effects. According to palace inventory records, virtually every item from Paul Friedrich's chambers was burned within days of his death, including papers that might have shed light on his final emotional state. The official story of a natural death would stand unchallenged for decades, but whispers persisted in German court circles about the true circumstances surrounding the end of one of the most tragic figures in 19th century European nobility. For more than a century, the story of Duke Paul Friedrich of Mecklenburg-Schwerin remained buried beneath layers of deliberate silence. His family's systematic destruction of evidence was so thorough that by 1900, most German court circles had forgotten he ever existed. But erasure, no matter how complete, cannot entirely eliminate truth from history. The few surviving documents that escaped the family's purge paint a devastating picture of what LGBTQ+ individuals faced in 19th century European nobility. Paul Friedrich's tragedy was not unique. Across the continent, similar stories of forced marriages, medical treatments, aginum, and mysterious deaths suggest a systematic campaign to eliminate any deviation from heterosexual norms among the ruling classes. Contemporary historians who have studied surviving records from other German noble houses have identified at least 12 similar cases of family members who disappeared from official records after displaying what court documents euphemistically called irregular attachments. According to researchers, the methods used against Paul Friedrich represented a coordinated approach that noble families shared through private correspondence. What makes Paul Friedrich's case particularly significant is the accidental preservation of documents that revealed the full extent of his family's actions. The letters discovered in the 1920s, along with medical records that surfaced decades later, provide rare insight into the devastating reality faced by LGBTQ+ individuals whose personal lives could threaten dynastic stability. The Duke's relationship with Alessandro Moretti represented something revolutionary for its time, a nobleman willing to risk everything for authentic love. According to historians who have studied similar cases, most individuals in Paul Friedrich's position chose the safety of conformity over the danger of authenticity. His willingness to defy family expectations marks him as an early example of LGBTQ+ resistance within European nobility. Modern researchers have uncovered evidence suggesting that Paul Friedrich's story was not entirely forgotten by contemporary LGBTQ+ communities. Coded references in artistic works from the late 19th century hint that his fate served as a warning to others about the dangers of challenging societal norms. The systematic erasure of Paul Friedrich's story reflects broader patterns of LGBTQ+ persecution that extended far beyond individual families. According to contemporary legal experts, the combination of medical authority and family power created a system where LGBTQ+ individuals could be effectively disappeared without legal recourse or public accountability. Perhaps most tragically, Paul Friedrich's death marked the end of what might have been a different path for LGBTQ+ acceptance in German society. His early openness about his identity and willingness to challenge social boundaries represented possibilities that were systematically destroyed by family intervention. Today, as we uncover these buried stories, Paul Friedrich's life serves as a reminder of the countless individuals whose authentic selves were sacrificed to maintain the facade of noble respectability. His tragedy illuminates the human cost of societies that value reputation over individual dignity and conformity over authentic love. If this story has moved you, please subscribe to help us continue uncovering these hidden histories. Every silenced voice deserves to be remembered, and every story like Paul Friedrich's reminds us why LGBTQ+ rights remain so crucial today. These aren't just historical curiosities, they're testimonies to human resilience in the face of systematic oppression. The Duke, who once filled palace halls with music and laughter, deserves to be remembered not for the scandal that destroyed him, but for the courage he showed in trying to live authentically in a world determined to erase him.